Blessings, blessings, blessings. I invite you to step into this prayer with me. I invite you to relax and celebrate this special moment. As we come together, infinite joy, inspiration, delight, and celebration unfold as each one of us. Sweet, sweet Spirit, infinite presence, source of all that is, abounding with joy, delight, celebration, inspiration, and more. I woke up this morning with the birds chirping at my window. When I see my friends, I celebrate the moment. Yes, all that is, each of us is divinity expressing. In my mind's eye, I take a look around. I take in the wonder of this earth. Take in the wonder of nature, of this beautiful center. And as each of us spins in infinity, each of us is love. Each of us channeling source, infinite possibility. Each of us as a drop of water in an infinite ocean. There is only one. I unite myself knowing I am one with Divine Mind and all that is. I see delight and love. In oneness, I see my soul, and my spirit rises. I see ripening of life, of love, of joy. Feel that. The universe opens up for each of us as we step through into greater joy. Hearts and souls celebrating this moment, celebrating community. We are each co-creators of our experiences. In deep reverence, I know God shows up in each of us, that all good shows up in each of us as us. I allow, I accept, I receive. I know the words spoken today inspire. The music is joy, and our community is rich with love and delight. In deep gratitude for our coming together, I know each of us is manifesting possibility. Possibility come to life, opening up as channels of divine good. I release this into this spiritual law which expresses naturally and eternally. The life principle manifests as me, as us. I let go, I let God, and together we affirm, and so it is.
So a cardiologist and an internist walk into a bar. The bartender gets very upset and kicks them both out, saying, "I can't handle a paradox." You should have been at the piano so you could do the little, yeah. But this week we're looking at a paradox mindset, creating, developing a paradox mindset. And a paradox comes originally from the Greek, which meant contrary to opinion. So we all know it's this way, but they're saying, no, there's another point of view. In the Latin, it meant seemingly absurd, but really true. Brene Brown calls it the appearance, note that word, the appearance of contradiction between two related components. We live in a world and we live in a universe of paradox. The Taoists knew this. The second chapter of the Tao Te Ching says, under heaven all can see beauty as beauty only because there is ugliness. All can know good as good only because there is evil. Therefore, having and not having arise together. Difficult and easy complement each other. Long and short measure each other. High and low rest upon each other. Silence and sound harmonize each other. Front and back follow one another. You know, our brains were originally kind of evolved into an either-or consciousness, which was important, you know, to make quick assessments of things, to stay alive. Is that breakfast or am I its breakfast? That's an important distinction early on in life, in our human history, right? However, as we evolve into humanity's next expression, we must expand to include, we don't get rid of either-or thinking, we expand to include a both-and thinking, to accept this and that. Moving out of linear binary thinking and away from what Jim Collins calls the tyranny of the or to the freedom of and. You know, if I invited you over to my house and I said, I've got some dessert for you, and there's two flavors of ice cream, there's chocolate or strawberry, which one do you want? A person in either or consciousness would make a choice between one or the other, right? A person in both and consciousness might say, why don't you put both together in a bowl and I'll make a swirl? Or they say, I don't want any ice cream at all, thank you. Or they'll say, neither one of those works for me. Let me run down to the store and get some mint chocolate chip ice cream. In other words, there's all sorts of other solutions between, you know, you have the choice between chocolate or strawberry. So it's getting outside of that. It's getting outside of the box, as we like to say, to the point where we suddenly realize there's no box even to get outside of because we're so far out of that. You know, most of us were taught, especially in school, to look for the right answer. Anybody besides me? Yep, a couple of you. But life doesn't really work that way. We live in a world of light and dark, of warmth and cold. Have you noticed today? Happy October, by the way. We live in a world of violence and tenderness. As religious scientists, we hold the ideas of oneness and multiplicity, of an infinite presence that is both good and can show up as brokenness, an ideal of wholeness and life, also as sickness and death, abundance and lack. We hold these paradoxical ideas. Next year, I'm going to be teaching a series of 5 or 6 week long classes that we're going to use this a new book that just came out in August called Ernest Holmes at Asilomar. And it's his talks that he gave at the Asilomar Retreat Center, which was a big gathering place for religious scientists in the last 5 years of his life. So it's kind of the culmination of, or when he's at his highest and best of his philosophy. The Science of Mind textbook that most of us are familiar with, that have read that, was published in 1938. And so this is 20 years on from that. And I noticed that the series of talks that he gave in 1957 had these titles: Fear is Faith. Bondage is Freedom. It's not his course on S&M, by the way. Time is the timeless. The relative and the absolute. The finite is the infinite. In one of those talks, he says, our subject tonight is that the limited is the limitless as the limited. But the limitless is not limited to what looks to be limited. He's also got a sense of humor, so he says, this is either terrifically profound or very silly. Or both. And both. consciousness and matter being different expressions of the same oneness is one of the other things we talk about. Either or thinking can encourage us to evaluate something as a certain way and not look any further. To find one solution and close off the possibility of anything more. And the growing polarization that we see in the world today is the result of this either or thinking. And then what we call ranking. So not only do I have an either or thinking, but this is better than that. I'm better than you are, or you're better than I am. Democrats are better than Republicans, or vice versa, et cetera, et cetera. And so it shows up in politics or religions, shows up in gender identities or racial issues, the stuckness in and attachment to a particular point of view when there are infinite points of view available. Breathe that in. Often our very language and questions support an either-or mindset. Are you a morning person or a night owl? Are you a Democrat or Republican? Are you a liberal or a conservative? Are you a cat lover or a dog lover? Do you like chocolate ice cream or strawberry ice cream? Are you an introvert or extrovert? Are you male or female? Are you a meat eater or a vegetarian? Are you fat, thin, young, old, pro-choice, pro-life? All this stuff. And the more intensely that we identify with a particular polarity, with a particular position, so we stop worrying, thinking about possibilities, and we start thinking about what's my position on this. We hear politicians talk about that all the time, but we all have our positions on things. And the more we identify, the more intensely we identify, the more difficult it is to let go, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. And this is why you get people who will sit there and insist that the earth is flat and was created in 6 days by a big guy in the sky 4,200 or 4,400 years ago. And that there's a God up there overseeing everything and everyone and manipulating things on this planet for its own personal agenda. Breathe. In our own personal lives, we get attached to our own beliefs and either-or thinking. Either I'm spiritual or materialistic. We can get so focused on the oneness and the spiritual truth and the cosmically big picture that we don't reach out and love and support each other, embracing our humanity. Or we can get so locked up in our humanity and suffering that we lose sight of the divinity in ourselves and others as we try to heal that or correct that. So in order to grow, we have to break free of what Jim Collins calls the tyranny of the or and into the genius of the and. This is often an uncomfortable shift, by the way, especially if you're emotionally invested in a certain belief or point of view. Anybody besides me find that they're invested in certain points of view and beliefs? Yep. I remember when Linda asked me, and I've told this story a number of times when I was buying my new car, or thinking about buying my new car, I was affirming something of I don't have enough money, or I don't, whatever it was, I don't remember anymore. And she looked at me and said, do you want to continue to affirm that? I was emotionally attached to that belief until she finally went, wake up, got a little slap up alongside the head. Not physically. So we get invested in certain beliefs or point of views, often even when we know that that belief or practice no longer serves us. We'll still cling to it because there's a comfort in certainty. And we live in a culture that encourages, the certainty of the right answer, hanging out with like-minded people, which is people who think like me, right? Whoever me is, and values mental and emotional comfort over change. There's a Pink Floyd song that says, did you accept a walk-on part, or trade a walk-on part in a war for a lead role in a cage? Where are we willing to be? In order to embrace the genius of the and, we have to let go of the identity to which we cling and be willing to float, to surface, to dance in the unknown, to surf. Richard Feynman, a physicist, said, I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. Rather are questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. Life is in constant motion, constant change, constant evolution into newness. In order to harmonize with life, we have to embrace change, we have to embrace growth, we have to embrace shift, we have to embrace that newness even when it's uncomfortable. Do we live on the green growing edge, which is what Mary Morrissey calls it, or do we live on the old dying couch? Or perhaps do we live some other way? You know, there's a saying that if you're not growing, you're dying. And even that is an either-or statement, because in truth, we're all growing and dying simultaneously at the same time, yes? What can we learn from this? What can we learn? How can we create newness and oldness from that? See, we can honor the new and the old. I was having a conversation with a couple of people recently that we talked about throwing a baby out with the bathwater. And it's like, no, refresh the bathwater. Don't have to throw the bathwater out, don't have to throw the baby out. Are we willing to explore beyond our either-or thinking? A few ways of doing that, a few ways of thinking and feeling. I love it. Yesterday in our grief circle group, one of the people talked about that they became aware that their mind operates at about 200 miles an hour and their heart operates at about 10 miles an hour. Can we put those two together? Not being locked into one or the other. Can we honor both? So the first thing that helps us is a playful curiosity. Playful curiosity, which is the opposite of rushing to certainty and rushing to find the right answer as the destination, and instead invites playfully viewing life, dancing with life in new and creative ways. Can we play? When we're very invested in creating solutions, but not attached to a particular solution. I used to work with a group that in the conversations they said highest thought wins. Didn't matter who it came from. There was a hierarchical structure in the group, but it didn't matter who it came from. Ralph Waldo Emerson, many of you know as one of the fathers or founders of Transcendentalism in America, had meetings in his house, and it was Ralph Waldo, and it was the Hawthornes, Nathaniel Hawthorne, it was the Alcotts, Louisa May Alcott, you know, and that all those families sort of lived near each other. And he had a handyman that asked if he could listen in on the conversations. And he said, well, yeah, you can sit down the hallway and listen in on the conversations, right? They were around the table in the great room. After a while, the handyman kept throwing in these little questions and these little thoughts. They finally said, you know what? You belong at the table. You're not out over there. You're not separate from us. It was inclusive. The handyman's name, by the way, was... thank you, Henry David Thoreau. I've got a lot of paint. I've been painting all weekend, so I think I have paint fumes in my brain right now. It's a little blue because we're painting blue. Can we open this? Can we be attached to the solution, but not a particular solution? To finding a solution, to creating a solution. And then it takes not taking sides, but going for the highest idea and then creating space for an even higher idea. So that there is no one answer. This is being open at the top, which we talked about in our teaching. Another quality of and thinking and feeling is vulnerability. Am I willing to hang out in uncertainty? We hate uncertainty, don't we? It's really uncomfortable. Am I willing to live in the messiness of life, the messiness of uncertainty? Brene Brown reminds us that vulnerability is a trait that we often admire in others, but don't want to reveal in ourselves. I don't want you to see my messiness. The opposite of vulnerability is control, which is living in the appearance of certainty. Yes, I've got it all together. Yes, I'm perfect. It's actually the opposite of how life works. Have you noticed? Real life is uncontrollable and uncomfortable. It's uncontrollable and it's uncontrolled. It just happens. When we live with curiosity and vulnerability, we live in the now moment. We can be flexible because we're not attached to the past identities and we're not attached to our future fears and anxieties. Can we be here now? Can we just be here now without attachment, without an agenda, a personal agenda of how to be here now? Can we be open, flexible, ready to dance with the divine? Dance with this life. In Zen Buddhism, this openness is what is known as beginner's mind. And they use riddles known as koans to cut through certainty and move the student into what's called the great doubt, which is an openness to the awareness that things may not be as they seem. There's a story told of two monks who are arguing about a flag. And one says, the flag is moving. And the other one says, the wind is moving. A third one walks by and says, neither the flag nor the wind, the mind is moving. Rumi tells us that in order to understand the dance, one must be still. And in order to truly understand stillness, one must dance. This idea is also captured in Anais Nin's statement that we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. We're always filtering through our own lens of experience and opinions and ideas. And to just be aware of that. It's okay that we do that, but we have to be aware that we're doing that. And that things might not be what we think they are. That person might not be as messed up as we really think they are. You know, there's that lovely Native American saying that don't judge a person until you walk a mile in their moccasins. I don't know what's going on for that person. We consider God to be infinite. And you know, I'll remind people who are newer that we don't think of God as some big guy in the sky, but as the infinite presence, the infinite beingness, the infinite isness that is everywhere, surrounding all of us. So we consider that to be infinite possibility beyond our finite intellectual understanding. And so God must be a paradox. God must be this and that because there's nothing that is outside of the divine. There is nothing that is outside of a oneness, of a wholeness. It's not limited to this or that. And then since everything is God in form, everything, including you and me, is an expression of that paradoxical nature. Ernest Holmes says in Living Without Fear, he says, the riddle of the universe is a paradox. The question is its own answer, for the mind that asks the question is also of the mind that answers the question. I remember that from my Zen teacher, that you can't ask a question if you don't already know the answer. Somewhere in your consciousness, you know there's an answer. Maybe you don't yet, maybe you haven't yet let yourself become aware of it, but there is an answer. Are you willing to let that divine nature express through you? Are you willing to let that paradoxical nature and that openness and that not attached to this or that express through you? Will you have the courage to choose curiosity and vulnerability over the comfort of certainty? I'm asking that. Will you have the courage to choose that? So this week, one spiritual practice, and that is let yourself become aware of an area in your life that is calling for change. Let yourself engage in playful curiosity about it. Let go of needing an answer, a solution, to figure it out. I always love it when I'm in a practitioner session and somebody says to me, it's like, I got to figure this out. It's like, stop. If you could figure it out, you would have. 12-step has a lovely saying that says, my best thinking got me here. Can we let go of having to have an answer and play? That's our spiritual practice. Take something that's in your life that you know needs a little shift or a little change, and just open to what's the solution without having to become attached to having the solution. Let yourself just playfully be curious about it. You willing to do that this week? Yes. Thank you. I'm going to close with a pair of quotes, which is different than a paradox. But maybe it's not. Brian Emerson, in his book Navigating Polarities, says, standing in the third way, and his idea of the third way is either or thinking, and then there's a third way of thinking. I say that there's far more than a third way of thinking, but he calls it that. It's just to get us out of that duality. Standing in the third way is a practice. It relies on a way of being and doing that most of us were never taught. It requires self-awareness, conscious choice, and courageous action. And then this past week, Richard Rohr said, in this new realm, everything belongs. This awareness is sometimes called a second naivety. It is a return to simple consciousness. The first awareness, when we kind of first become aware, is a dangerous naivety which doesn't know but thinks it does. How many of us have been in some situation where we think we know, only to find out later, no, I didn't really know that. In second naivety, darkness and light coexist. Paradox is revealed, and we are finally at home in the only world that has ever existed. This is true knowing. Here, death is a part of life, and failure is a part of victory. Opposites collide and unite, and everything belongs. When I think of paradoxical thinking, I'm reminded of one of the fathers of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, Niels Bohr, who said if you're contemplating quantum physics and you're not a little bit dizzy, you're not really understanding quantum physics. If you're understanding life and you're not a little bit dizzy, you're not really contemplating life. And we get dizzy because we have our attachment to how it is or how it should be. And all of a sudden something new is coming along that challenges that. We live in the world where that is happening. I've heard people who are upset because, everybody suddenly is identifying with pronouns, and those young people, they're just using they and them. How do I know if they're a boy or a girl? It doesn't matter. We're being called in so many ways to get out beyond this or that thinking. And yes, it's uncomfortable for us who grew up with binary this or that. There's a right answer and a wrong answer thinking. I don't want to be wrong, so I got to be right. And if I'm not right, then I'm wrong. Guess what? There's something out there beyond that. Out beyond ideas of right thinking and wrong thinking, there is a field. I'll meet you there. We have an affirmation. Say this with me. I play with a creative mind, embracing paradox. I value courage over comfort. And one more time. I play with a creative mind, embracing paradox. I value courage over comfort. So it is.